Good morning. Once again, we're at Bird and Beckett in San Francisco for our San Francisco Lives Live Talk series. My name's Denise Sullivan, and my guest this morning is Gail Meadows, principal, co-founder of the Meadows Livingstone School in San Francisco. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you, Denise, and hello. It's
Good
a
to
fine
see
morning in
you.
San Francisco, isn't it?
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
It's our summer.
Yeah, finally. Yeah, so we've talked a handful of times, right, during the pandemic.
Right.
But I guess the headline really here is this fall was back to school after a long year off.
For a long year of Zooming.
Yeah,
Yes.
so what's that been like?
Well, we're elated to be back in person. However, it has been somewhat difficult. The children are having a hard time focusing. Now, we pride ourselves on teaching children critical thinking. Well, during Zoom, it all went out the door. And now they just want to hang out with their friends, and that's fine. So we have a lot of recess, but we do have lots of extracurricular activities. So and we have a little bit of acting out and still some depression. But they're very happy to be together. And they obey the rules, except not social distancing so well. But they keep their masks on. Children don't mind wearing masks, you know. They keep their masks on, and they pretty much use the sanitizer, but they still want to hug me, right, and each other, right? And
Yeah.
we have wrestling matches. Everyone has to be on their knees, and then we have a circle, and they can wrestle. Then I realized, oh no, it's not social distancing, and I let them do it for a little while, and they said, okay, we understand, you know, right? So it's been trying, but we are having a good time.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, in 40 plus years, right, since the school's founding, which I'd like you to take us back and we'll go over that. Have you ever had any kind of event? I mean, obviously, you know, not a year-long and going on 2-year-long pandemic, but any kind of event that disrupted the flow in any similar way that you could compare?
Never. We weren't alive during, you know, all the other.
Yeah, of course.
Right. I've never had that before.
Yeah, I know you do have some experience with children coming and going from school, families who travel or relocate.
Right.
You take children that are, their present, you know, school situation isn't working out, so you
Right.
bring them on. So, like, I'm sure some of that kind of like need to adapt quickly has been part of your toolkit,
It's been
right?
part of my toolkit.
But this whole electronic component, yeah, why don't you just take us from, you know, the one-room schoolhouse back in the day to, you know, a little journey through time
A
with
little
Meadows
journey through
Livingstone.
time. Well, shall I start with my education or my family life, or?
Well, why don't we start with the school and
Okay,
then
the school.
I'll go back to Gail.
Well, 1979 in the Broad Street neighborhood in San Francisco, in a little small Victorian house, I had 10 students. And I actually stole those students from another school I was teaching. The children, it was a multicultural school, but mostly the children were playing and the teachers were hurting children. Yes, they had to stand on one foot and hold dictionaries. Now, who can do that at age 8, 9? And they would tape their heads and their bodies down to a desk. So when I went into the classroom and saw that, I whispered to the children, tell your parents what's happening to you. And
Gail,
yes.
what year was this exactly? Because it sounds like the Middle Ages.
No, it wasn't. It
Yeah.
must have been, I think it was 78.
Wow.
78. It was in Daly City, California.
Wow.
Right. And little boys were looking under the stall, little girls using the bathroom. And I mentioned it to the teachers, and she said, well, that's okay. They're curious. So I told the little girls to look under the stall at the little boys. And the teacher said, we could fire you because that's harassment of little boys. Okay. So I was walking home with a friend one day, And she said, this is a terrible school. We should leave. She said, your mother has a couple of, they were called nursery schools. You could do the same thing. So I called my mother, and first I had a meeting. I encountered parents. I accosted parents when they came to pick up their children and told them what was happening. And these were all African-American children except one European-American child. But his friends were African-American. So they came to a meeting, and I told them, and I started my school. I called my mother, and she said, what do you need? I need a check for supplies. I need desks and chairs. And she sent me, what I needed. She asked me to make a budget, and I did. And she sent me what I needed. And she sent me a couple of months or a year's worth of salary for myself. So not everyone is so fortunate, but I was. So I started my school. It was on Broad Street in the Ocean View neighborhood, in a little Victorian house. It was, we had a large backyard. So we could do a lot of nature study. And the parents were all on board, and they came a lot, and lots of volunteering. And it was a marvelous time for me and the children. Then the owner wanted to put a barber shop in that space, so we had to leave. Well, my friend found the farm on Potrero and Cesar, and we moved into there. That was interesting. It was an actual farm because, a barnyard. We did have birds from everywhere. We had chickens. We had bee boxes. We had the freeway. Right? But interesting enough, there were no houseless people in those days. Not there. Right. Yeah. And that grew and grew and grew. But now we're still at the farm.
Yeah, and you've been that's been your steady, solid location for all these years. So, thanks for giving that early history, because I see how you can't really extricate it from your relationship with your mom and your early education. No. So, tell us how that evolved. I remember when we talked for the Examiner, I hadn't heard the story about you kind of being like little teacher's assistant, right? Right.
Well, I was there, I was, after a while, my mother didn't teach at all. And I had a teacher, a preschool teacher. Her name was Marguerite Gibson. And I don't know why I remember that name, but she did make an impact on me. Well, one very good story that I like, and I've written a blog about it. When I was about 10, my friends and I were going off after school to I guess it was called a sundry, you can get ice cream and soda fountain. Mm-hmm. And I said to my friends, we were going into the front door, and I said to them, let's not go into the front door. Let's do what they made black people do back in the day, in the olden days. So they thought it was a fun thing to do. But I'm serious about this at this point because I understood. Then I asked them, so we went to the back door and we took our seats at the counter. And I said, do you know what segregation is? And they said, no, we don't know what segregation is. So I'm telling them. And then I just remember I started channeling a Baptist preacher, and I'm telling them about segregation and racism.
How old were you?
About 10, right? Right. So I did see some older women at the counter with us too. Well, when I got back to school the next day, when I told my friends, ask your parents, they'll tell you about segregation and racism. So when I got back to school the next day, this teacher, whom was not very nice to me because he thought that how could I memorize? We played this game called Name That Date. Well, because I took dancing and tumbling and tennis, and you had to, and we recited poetry at my house too, so you had to memorize these things. I would always, I wouldn't sit down. I didn't miss for maybe like 7 or 8 dates. It was easy, but this day he said I was cheating generally, but this day he came up to me. I'm the and I'm standing up, and he's asking me all these dates, and he said, someone's telling you that you're cheating. And the kids in the class said, nobody's cheating. That's just the way she is. She can do that. And he came up to me, and he took me by my shoulders, and he threw me down into the chair and said, how dare you talk about racism? You don't even know what it is. And I said, I do know what it is. I'm like, oh, you shouldn't be talking back to this teacher. But that was okay because I didn't know what it was. And he said, and the lady said you were saying racism and segregation. And then a friend said, she could spell it too. Right. So, but when he threw me down, there was a gasp. Everyone gasped, Well, fast forward to last year, I kept seeing this teacher's name on Facebook and people are praising him. So he died. And I wrote a letter and said, I feel for you that your teacher has died, your favorite teacher, but he wasn't my favorite teacher and he's harassing. He harassed me. He hurt me. And I was assaulted on Facebook. Why can you say that? You never said that. There was no racism. But other people said, we know. So my friends, the friends that were mine in school then said, he didn't do that. And I reminded them they were in that classroom that day. Well, what I think it was frightening to them too, and maybe they buried that. Right?
Sure.
So that was probably the start of teaching. I mean, I taught other friends, how to play chess or checkers or jump rope or something. Right. But no, that was...
Wow. And, we didn't mention where that took place.
That took place in a small town in Kansas called Salina, Kansas.
Yeah. So that's where your early life was spent. And so, it's so interesting because the story that you tell is one that we see and hear about still happens, and not just in places like Salina, Kansas, but all over the country, right?
Right, all over.
Where young students are mishandled, literally, physically assaulted in the classroom, verbally abused, and certainly not psychologically, emotionally, spiritually cared for, right, by their elders and teachers in these institutions. Yeah. So I totally get that was your formative event, right? And then, but the opposite is your mission and your curriculum, right? Is built on caring for this child.
We're unashamedly Black, and cultural. We teach it, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is who you are, this is all the heroes and sheroes from our culture, when we go back to Africa, we had kings and queens, we had papyrus we wrote on. So cultural competency is, really stressed. And
yeah. And this is the work that you've been doing, like we said, for 40 plus years. So when you see that, like, some folks are just getting up to speed and other folks are not on that page at all because, like you said, they cannot conceive of this idea of white supremacy or anything on the spectrum of racism in America. I've heard that you have been nicknamed a interrupter of racism.
Right.
Like, let's go through that. What if you see or hear of an event like that, or someone's pushing back, like you said, those friends, those quote unquote friends on Facebook did. What do you say?
Well, I reminded those friends that they were in that class, and this is what he did. And my mother, I told them that. I asked him, do you remember that he didn't touch me anymore? But he didn't talk to me either. But I told my mother, and she went to school, and that was nixed. Right. So I let them know that there is help. There are allies, and that you should stand up for what you believe. And, we teach children. But sometimes when we teach the children, they don't have any filters. So, So they just say... One of my students went to a barbecue, and his mother's white boyfriend came with a Confederate flag T-shirt. And the kid said, "Why are you wearing that T-shirt?" And the guy said, "Oh, somebody gave it to me." And he said, "Well, you should give it back." And then he said, and it's not the true Klan it's not the true Confederate flag. This is the white supremacist flag. And so I don't want to use the word arm, but we give them, we give them a lot of information, and help them with the self-esteem, because you have to be a strong child too. I felt that I was a strong child when I could answer him back. And that's
Right.
because my mother would say she has to undo what was done in school every day.
Wow.
And that wasn't the only thing. Why are you wearing those
Yeah.
fancy clothes? Are you on scholarship? Who knows what scholarships when you're 10? You're not thinking of that.
Right.
Right.
You're just being you. So, but I guess like when you have students who come, say they've come out of a situation in public school or whatnot, where they were treated that exact way that you were all those years ago, and you can recognize that kind of trauma, right? And that they come to your classroom and like you say, they might not have the right words,
have the
or
tools.
they might not even know how to behave in a classroom where there is nurturing and care, right?
Right.
So what are sort of the layers and levels of adaptation with a child like that?
Well, first of all, the child has to realize it. I mean, as a child stays in our school, let's say we had a young lady, and she was 10, and she told us, we have experts journal. So you read a book about insects for 30 minutes, and then you write everything you remember. So we were reading about the Negro Leagues, and she wrote, I was afraid of black people, and I was afraid when I came to this school. I thought the children would not speak properly and they would have messy hair. And one little girl, she's about 9, stood up and said, "What are you saying?" And as we go along through the years, and so then this big girl started crying. She said, well, people said mean things to me, but I never said anything. Mm-hmm. So as we go along, and see, that was a teaching moment right there. I didn't have to say anything, because I had taught someone, So we do peel the layers off because they don't know that they have been abused. One girl was a tall person, and they called her the black nerd basketball player. And they said, that's the only reason why we like you. And so another student of mine said, you shouldn't have played. You shouldn't have helped them win until they could treat you better. And she said, I didn't know. And she said, and my mother didn't answer me when I said, why am I the only one that looks like this at my school? And another child said, they're in denial.
Right. So they learn that because you model it
yes.
for them. And I also love this idea because I know that you pair the younger students. We should talk about the age range, mm-hmm. and then this idea that everyone has a buddy, and that you pair the youngers with the olders, and they teach each other. So like you said, it's often hands off. Teaching, right?
Often hands-off teaching. I remember when it was time to learn to teach children how to tell time. There was a first grader, and she was always in trouble. She was a great kid, but she just didn't have much control of herself. So she would sit on the stairs. And that was your time out, to sit on the stairs. But I don't want to remove anyone totally, because she can learn what we are teaching. So when it was time for her to tell time, she said, I can tell time. Why? She said, because I was sitting on the steps and I listened. I said, okay. Wow. Right. And I said, is that why you didn't ask to get up? She said, that's right. I was learning how to tell time. And she said, I'm a better reader too. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important, because we say that we have a village at our school, and it's important that you get to know the members of your village, and it's important for big children to know that they're responsible. And they're role models. And some days they say, we're tired of being a role model. And, well, I bet you are, but, take care of your business. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I know that you have a very high rate of continued and advanced education among your students that that attended, K through 6, or at some point attended school with you, right? And this kind of supports all the research that comes from preschool enrollment in preschool. You, of course, were a Head Start teacher yourself.
No, I wasn't.
Oh, you were not?
No, I never taught Head Start.
Oh,
yeah, no.
Did did the Livingstone
Oh,
of
Bob
Meadows
wasn't a
Livingstone?
teacher. He was a Head Start social worker. He was an
Aha.
activist for the Head Starts in San Francisco.
Okay,
Right.
that's where I got the
Yeah,
Head
that's where-
Start
yeah,
from.
yeah.
But okay, back to what I was trying to demonstrate was that, early education foundation usually indicates that a child will continue
Right.
through to secondary and higher education.
Right.
So tell me a little about those stats among your students.
Well, 99% of our students go on to university, and I don't know the statistics about going beyond, but we have lots of lawyers, doctors, teachers, psychologists, therapists, business owners. What else do we have? Pretty much everything.
Right.
I can't think of engineers.
Right.
So and the nice part is that almost all of them come back to see me, and they'll bring a baby, a child, which is
Wow.
nice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I hear that a lot about, intergenerational and multi-generational experience among those folks who get to stay in the city,
Yes.
like you have and like your school has, right? But we don't. We hear and we know that there is not a lot of that, particularly in the African American community.
3%, I believe.
Right. People have been forced into displacement, relocation, economic.
Right. Out migration.
Yeah. So let's just do a little compare and contrast from the time you arrived in San Francisco and cultural life here, and yeah, what's happened?
Well, when I first arrived in '79, I was never the only person of color in a room or in a restaurant or in a bookstore, anywhere. There was bookstores, businesses, more bookstores, more businesses, more cultural happenings, community centers. It was here, plays. It was just here. It was like an African American person's holiday, right? Now, almost always, it feels like a holiday when I see another black person, just one other. No one's rude to me, but oftentimes it doesn't feel comfortable because no one else looks like you. Why not? Are you keeping us out, And I do take my place in the world, so I'm not going to not go into some place or be involved, but pardon me. It's a different place. It's just a different place, but also it's a different place for everyone here that had lived here, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and then, how that directly impacts the enrollment or, it's an interesting point that a lot of the students of color are not necessarily being raised in homes where the parents are people of color, and that is why they need you for their cultural education. But just an interesting point to note, if we have any kind of percentages or ideas of like through the years how that's shifted, were you enrolling children from biracial families or just strictly black nuclear families, and now it's kind of the balance has shifted. Yeah?
The balance has definitely shifted, but in the beginning, I had, which is interesting, many children with a black mother and a Jewish father, and that is my situation, marital situation. Most of our children come from Oakland, for one thing. This time, we have had a variety, and it's still so much. And I especially like it when European American parents adopt children of color and they come to my school. The parents take classes and they're not afraid to say, well, maybe I'm doing some harm to my child by not immersing them in their culture. For instance, I saw the film or the series about Kaepernick. Mm-hmm. His parents were totally clueless about the racism their child was experiencing. They loved him, but they were totally clueless. And why wouldn't they be if they're not immersed in another culture?
Right.
Right. And that's not just black and white. That's black and Asian, white and Asian, just, and Native American. it's a sad ordeal or a sad situation where we're not blending ourselves into other cultures, and
Well, also when we talk about the makeup of, the U.S. population, that increasingly it's going to be this blend.
I know it.
So it would, yeah. But anyway, with the trying to figure out this disconnect about why aren't we doing what makes sense. I mean, we could be here all day.
We could be here all day. we could say racism. That's a big one.
Yeah,
right?
we could take that on. But,
Yeah, we could take that.
Yeah, but
we don't
it's
have
beyond
time.
the scope of this discussion today.
Right.
But you did put me in mind of something else. Oh, yeah, well, we're talking a lot about the necessity of a cultural education, and I would like to get more in depth about that. But we also should take note of the basic, the science, the math, the.
We have those things.
Yes.
We actually have. Well, our school is a Afrocentric, feminist, academic, performing arts school, political school. So we have, Writers Workshop teachers, we have math teachers, we have science, we have, what else do we have? Reading, we have all these subjects, right? And we have a special magazine that we use called Indie Kids, and that's our political, part of our political education. And our students were just reading about incarcerated people, their servitude, and how they work for pennies a day or nothing. And they were just appalled. And I heard them talking about it on the playground.
Wow.
Yeah, because this magazine is written by a child and a experienced writer. So they help them do the research, and but so it speaks to them because
Right.
I always read to them, this person was 10 years old or 12 years old, 13 years old, and this other writer. And then they read the book, The History of the World of the United States for young people. Talk about a soapbox. They were standing on it. And one kid said, I told them about a soapbox. And one kid said, is that like the auction block? No, it's not. Right. So we have all the academics too, and all the extracurricular activities we had enhanced their academics.
Right. Yeah. It's because, it's a holistic effort, and
Yes.
it makes perfect sense. So why don't we do this on a massive scale?
Yeah.
But anyway, we could solve the problems of the world in
Right.
just like that. Your one room, well, it's more than one room,
Yeah,
but I like the idea of it, is that we're all under one roof together, working together, hand in hand, it's kind of seamlessly shifting from yoga to now we're going to do spelling, now we're going to do a little history lesson. I want to know some of their favorite, heroes and sheroes from history who always, year after year, they just latch onto.
Langston Hughes.
Wow.
They love Langston Hughes. They like Bessie Coleman too, but Langston Hughes,
Because they get to do the recitation.
They get to do the recitation. And then we also can say some kids will bring a cake or cupcakes one day. And I forgot, it might be his birthday, but they remember that. So we get to have a party. Right.
Wow.
Well, we have a party for, like if a person has a mother that's died and we find out her birthday, we have a party. When I was in public school, there was a little girl who wouldn't speak. So I had a classroom of gifted and talented children, and they said she definitely is, but she doesn't speak. So someone told me that her mother died, and I just sat beside her and I said, I'm sorry to hear that your mom died. If you know her birthday, maybe we could have a celebration. And she just looked at me and she said, I'll ask my dad. So her dad thought it was a great idea, and her big sister was in the 4th grade, wanted to come, and the teacher said, that's so morbid, she can't come. And the dad said she can come. So I don't know, that's one way of them getting interested in who we're speaking about. We might have a party, or Mammy Pleasant, I had a friend dress up as Mammy Pleasant. And I told them, they were learning to tell time, at 2:00 something special is going to happen. And through the back door comes this tall woman dressed as Mammy Pleasant. And one little boy was talking, but he was a little nervous, and she looked at him sternly and said, "No one talks when Mammy speaks." And the kid's like, "Oh, okay, right." They remember Mammy Pleasant. So sometimes acting, drama
Right.
or
Right.
films.
Oh, I love that costumed historical figures. Yeah.
Absolutely, So
Yeah.
they like Langston Hughes. They like Bessie Coleman because she was a daredevil.
Is it Aviatrix?
Aviatrix, yes, right. And I told them once when I was in Chicago, when I came out of the car rental, there's a street and named Bessie Coleman, in her honor. So I took a picture. They like it that they like Queen Nzinga because she was a warrior queen. Just anything that they can identify with, and anything that's exciting.
I imagine, years ago you had to do a lot of this research and bring it into the classroom alone and on your own. And now there's been kind of an explosion in literature and materials available. Is that
maybe it's going to be
accurate?
banned now.
Oh, stop.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, just as my parents had to do some research,
Right.
Like sometimes I used to hide books from them because the Bobbsey twins had a black mammy maid. But I love to read about the little kids and their adventures. And my dad would say, they're not interested in you. They don't have your their best at heart. Just like television. I never wanted to watch television near them because they would say, "This isn't right," or they'd make some off the cuff
Don't laugh
comment.
at that.
Yeah,
kind of
don't
thing.
laugh at that. And I'm not much of a television watcher to this day.
Right.
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 Yeah.
That's interesting. That reminds me, is like talking about quote unquote difficult subjects like reality with children of a certain age. I'd like to address that for a minute because, there's one thing to say, well, we don't watch that, or we don't say that, or we don't look at that. We
Right.
can't read this material. But having the dialogue, which I understand you do, when it is age appropriate.
Right.
Okay. Obviously, you're not going to talk about the ins and outs of police violence with children of a certain age. But when they get to the point where they want to have the discussion, how do you ascertain what's right for the classroom when?
Right. Well, one thing, if you see their eyes glaze over, that's one thing. Right?
Yeah, I'm asking you basic questions about teaching technique, but
I know.
these are extraordinary times, and we have a lot to talk about in the classroom or not.
Or not.
The parents are pushing back. It's all
I don't really have parents pushing back.
Okay.
And sometimes they come with some information that is too advanced for them. So I just drop it. Especially like it's a first or second grader, we just don't. So we get a book. So let's talk about Ruby Bridges today. That's, and let's talk about, the 8 children who went to high school and had to be escorted. It's a picture and it's not so frightening, so we can go that far, or we can see a video called And the Children Shall Lead. And it was about the Freedom Riders. So, and it plays all this Motown music too.
Right.
Well, that's not frightening, and it really gets their attention, and it angers them.
Sure. But at what point do we introduce, this is like really interesting to me as a person who doesn't have biological children of her own, but, the 16th Street Baptist Church tragedy, like that obviously comes on your history radar at some point, or is that left more to high school?
Well, our 5th and 6th graders, they
Yeah.
can, and we had a little girl, the 5 little girls that were bombed in the church. For a whole year, she dressed like those children.
Oh my.
I know. Her parents let her, and we talked about it, and they said she wants to, and I go, okay.
Wow.
What? She dressed like that.
So it's kind of a natural, like which child gravitates toward this, and then they develop, like we all do at their own pace.
At their own pace.
and
We
their
have a
own
child
interests.
that when she was in the 5th grade, or she was younger when she heard strange fruit, because I don't introduce that. They've seen pictures of
Sure.
lynching, but she heard the song, And she was at a celebration in Oakland. She was 10 years old, and they asked for people to come and perform. Well, our school is a performance school too, so she's going to get up and perform. And she sang Strange Fruit, and people were crying. And then some people were saying, why would she sing that? How does she know that? And her mother said, well, she's drawn to it, and, her school talks to her about it, but but she was old enough, right.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, just that they have a resource, like you have created a space where it's okay, to ask these questions. So I guess what I wanted to get at was, in these times where like every day there's some outrageous event, you must get some heartbreaking and humorous queries from the kids who are just like, Gail, what is going on right?
Right, we do. And lots of times the children make posters, and they'll get pictures of the people who have been slaughtered, killed by police officers. And that seems to help them get some reality or get a grip or something. They feel more.
Drawing
they feel
it
better.
out is
drawing it out. It's an art
right?
school too.
Yeah.
So I don't introduce what I think is frightening to a little kid. That's, because we introduced Harriet Tubman, and this little girl was crying and crying and crying at home, and her mother said, what are you crying about? And she said, Harriet, I feel so bad for Harriet. And her mother's thinking, Harriet, there's no girl in your school named Harriet. She said, Harriet Tubman, so she was old enough, but maybe not,
Right. But each person has their own sensitivities and is going to feel that other historical figure, from ages ago's pain, because that's how that little girl was built.
She also felt bad for Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi, the prisoner, right? And she felt bad for him.
Wow.
Right, but that we told her about. I mean, we can introduce bits.
Sure.
We can definitely introduce bits.
Sure.
Right.
Well, let's talk about the joy that we feel in the classroom when there's drumming lessons or yoga, dance,
singing,
tennis. and some of the great connections and liaisons that you have with, museums. And I know that Bryant Terry came in and did some cooking demonstrations. I mean, what are some of the highlights there?
And he also honored us at the museum. It was our day. We had no idea. They just sent us a letter and said it's going to be a special day, and there's a couple of schools we'd like to honor. The other schools didn't show up, so it was us. Right? So that's good. And also, our students, whenever we go out on a field trip, we, to say thank you to the people who have welcomed us, we give them a little show, some poetry or singing. And the people at MOAD, we've been going to MOAD a lot these past years. They're happy to see these children of color. And some people say, but they're singing and dancing. But that's okay if they're singing and dancing, They're saying thank you, And we've won some art contests, and that's interesting. We went to the children's art show, and we went to the door, and the lady said, oh, these are the Meadows students. And then a man said, oh, no, but there's someone's going to rival them this year. There's another art teacher that's really good, too. Linda Camarina. It's my sister. Right? It's like, okay. Right. Because my father was an artist.
Came from the same family, the same kind of head about what we're doing with these children, right?
So, and we get lots of letters, and people are saying, we saw you. We even get people stopping us on the street and saying, oh, my, these children are well behaved. Well, that's another part of you are responsible for yourself. And you're responsible to help the teachers teach you, and you're responsible to help with the smaller children.
Wow.
right? So,
Well, they do make an impression. I mean, and also because you engage them like in the world. I know that they've participated in things like Dia de los Muertos,
lots of times, yes.
and the annual Kwanzaa events across the city. I mean, they kind of have I don't know a magnetism that people like, oh wait, I saw them here. I saw them, kind of like celebrities.
It's kind of star quality, right? Right, and they revel in it. They like to, right?
Because they're representing Meadows Livingstone, and they have this idea now that they are important. Their culture is important,
right.
and it is at the root of this country's cultural output.
Yes.
They have internalized
They've
this.
internalized that. And when we can't vote or be activists anymore because we're too old, they'll step up. Yeah. A girl that graduated from our school goes to school someplace in Contra Costa County. Well, she heard that some girls were being sexually harassed. She had a demonstration. She planned a demonstration. And the principal came out and said, thank you. But I'm not sure why the principal didn't do something. But he did support her.
Right.
But still.
Right. I remember one of your students sang some Bessie Smith repertoire, and it just blew my mind. I mean, she's 12 years old or something, and just had everything down. And it's like, but this is not something that's going to leave her. She will carry this with her, and that means that Bessie Smith's legacy is carried forward too. I mean, a lot of things could easily be lost in the culture if there's not
someone
young
to carry it
folks
on.
carrying it on. So, I mean, thank you for educating our children, right?
It's important to me.
Oh my gosh.
I worry about teenagers sometimes.
Yeah.
Because they have it together and they have all this information and they love themselves, and then they go into teenagehood. And what I have seen is they take a break from themselves for a while. And then they come back. And that's okay. They have to find out about the world and where their place in it as a teenager,
Yeah.
And one person told me that his friends were smoking tons and tons of pot. And he said, I remember, Gail, you told me if I didn't want to do it, maybe I don't want to say I don't want to do it, but I'll say, my mother will murder me. And he said, and then everyone will say, oh yeah, our mothers. And he said, whew. I said, well, then you'll decide, when you want to do it or if you want to do it.
Yeah. But again, just this giving them the free agency to make decisions for themselves. And ultimately, if they have that ability, the critical thinking skills and whatnot, they'll do what they need to do to take care of themselves.
I think that's the most important skill young people have.
Yeah.
Be critical thinkers.
Yeah. So, do we know anything? I mean, this is a ridiculous question, I'm sure, but about as we go forward now into this new world of the unknown, are parents seeking to get this kind of education for their children? I mean, in light of what we've been through, okay, homeschooling is one thing. A smaller private specialty school like yourselves is another thing, and then there's all kinds of other choices. But what's working?
Well, for people of color, especially for African American people, they either go into public schools and just help out a lot, assist, or they do homeschool, or they find a school like mine. They're saying that the racism is so prevalent that it's not working for their children in big schools because they get lost. And personally, I would rather teach my students of color. I mean, what they want is a person of color, a person that the children can identify, to teach them about, just teach them and teach them about their culture. If you think about it, how many black teachers did you have?
There was one in my high school.
And can you imagine what it felt like for him? No, right. I had one student teacher, except my parents were teachers, and my dancing teacher was a black woman. that's it.
Right.
Yeah, see, so, and I was fortunate enough to have these two parents who happened to be activists.
Right. So what you're saying is more people of color entering education to educate the
They're
children.
not. They're
They're
not
not doing it.
They're not doing it. So they're finding schools like mine. There was a school in Palo Alto, and there's one or two in Oakland, and I don't know. There's a couple of them in New York, but they're finding them, or they're homeschooling them.
Yeah. And where do you have any idea where the curriculums are coming from? I mean, are there any books out there?
There are. You can get them online. You can get free
Yeah.
classes, but you can get Christian.
Yes, I was going
curriculum.
to say, as some of these are, some of the schools are also tied to religious organizations.
Religious-based schools too.
Yeah.
And then the parent generally, if they're not religious, they'll just say, well, it's a good curriculum, and it might be, but it's not working for the children. We use the key to curriculum math books, and we use them because it gives you a lot of practice. I noticed that they were purchased by the Christian books. So when I get ads, they send me ads, and I realize it was Christian. No. So I'm just going to buy as many as I can. And
well, math is math, right?
Right.
Or
But I don't want those other Christian. I mean, it's just a plethora of Christian books, but see, their other math books, or hardback math books, have more religious slant to them.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
See, so
that is, we've heard a
We don't
lot
want
about
that.
the textbook
Yeah.
controversies, and
Right.
it's, we do live in a bubble here.
Don't we?
Let's face it. but there are realities that our friends and neighbors are dealing with that some of us in this privileged seat are not always aware. Our consciousness has not been raised to that degree. What do you tell the children when they are confronted with just some outrageous, harm? That everyday racism is what it's called, right?
Everyday
is
racism.
That I don't see you, or I don't.
No, you're not.
And what do you tell them?
Well, we're fortunate enough that we have group therapy, and we discuss those issues there too. And we sometimes play a song. Last week we played Garland Jeffries. He's talking about Miami Beach, and no, he's talking about "Don't Call Me Buckwheat," and so some kid might remember, wait a minute, they called me Sunshine, and lots of times people say to little black kids, "How are you doing, Sunshine?" And the kid said, "I didn't know that wasn't nice to call me." So that comes out there,
Right,
or we
right.
might just be reading a book and it happens,
Yeah.
like a really good book, The Youngest Marcher. She's 8 years old, and there's a teenage march, a rally, and they're planning on getting arrested. And they're giving her candy. I know the judges or the police officer are giving her candy, like, "Oh, you've not had this," or something. And the kid said, they think she didn't have candy because she's black, and they think we're poor. And that's
Right.
another thing.
Yeah.
What they see on television and mainstream media, that black people are mean and poor and bad. And we have to,
Yeah. Yeah.
say,
Yeah. And then also, because of your location there at under the freeways, where the freeways coalesce, they call it the hairball.
The hairball,
in
yeah.
Local slang. Yeah. You are, as you said, these days, looking at houseless folks who are encamped there or spend a lot of time in nearby parks or,
Right.
Whatnot. And this has to be addressed with the children as you walk by,
It has
and
to be
how
addressed.
we treat folks who are living unhoused and whatnot. And it can also create problems. And so that's a difficult thing to navigate. What does that
Well,
look like on a day in, day out?
The teachers and I always say hello to them. You know, they're not faceless. We say hello to them, parents give them food, and the children are involved in giving them food. We've not, only once have we had a problem, and I don't think he was houseless. But the hairball is gone, and it's so rude. Hairball? Right. It is gone. There was a huge encampment as you come off of Bayshore and you turn onto Cesar, right on the corner there where the cars are rapid.
Right.
Well, that's gone too. So we have only one tent. And I noticed the kids wanted to know about this person.
Right.
I noticed that when he opened his tent, he had this beautiful pad inside, and he was dressed beautifully. Now, I don't know, and he had a nice haircut and a beautiful tent. So I don't know what's happening with him, but he's not friendly, and that's fine, you know. And we've had people say to us, "I'm not friendly, teacher." So then the children get it. They're not friendly, so don't, you know. And then after a while, you know, when they get meds, they'll say hello to us. But we do talk about, you know, some children come with a message that, they can get a job if they want. Right. So we talk about that, you know, or they're on drugs, and we talk about that. It's cold. You don't have any food. You don't have a shelter. If drugs is what's getting you through the night, then okay, you know. But that's not what children are doing. We're not there. You're not taking drugs. You have a home, and you're safe with your parent. You know. Yeah.
Yeah. These can all be sources of worry and anxiety.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Especially if there is trauma in the child's history or home, right? And I know you have to deal with that. But as you said, and we should mention, the Livingstone is your husband,
yes,
Bob
is.
Livingstone, and he's a therapist works in private practice and also come to
our school to see individual therapy and group therapy. He's an LCSW, and I think he's been in private practice for maybe 30 years or something, a long time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they have Mr. Livingstone, Dr. Livingstone, as a Bob, as they probably
as they
call him.
And they are so happy because if children don't have a male figure, they have him, and they love it. If they're in class and he calls for them, they'll say, "Bye, I'm going to therapy." You know, and it's a wonderful thing. They like it, and some children go home and say, "Oh, I need therapy. I'm having a hard time here." Right.
It's great.
So that means when they're an adult or a teen, you know, they'll know that's an option.
Yes, and then removed any stigma that may be, you know, come from the family or wherever they're getting it. You've removed that. Gosh, so many services you provide, Gail Meadows at Meadows Livingstone School. What do people need to do if they want to learn more about you?
We have a website, www.meadowslivingstoneschool.com, and you'll see our website. You can also go on YouTube and you can see some performances. Just look up Meadows Livingstone School, Stepping Up and Stepping On, or just look Meadows Livingstone School up, and you can see our band and our choir and our dance troupe. They can call school and talk to us, and we welcome visitors, but you have to be vaccinated. Yeah, parents can't come in the building unless they're vaccinated. Right.
Right, yeah. and any visitors need
to be vaccinated.
And any special guests or lecturers or
everybody.
That's wonderful. And any fundraisers or events, or do you do an annual giving?
Well, we do have annual giving. We also have fundraisers, but you know, because of COVID, that was eradicated. Yeah. But the city gave us a grant. Free and clear, no payback, just gave us a grant. They said, you know, you've been here for a long time. We've heard about you in many different situations, and here it is.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
I didn't know the city was just handing out grants that's really great news.
Yes.
Boy.
It was good for us, you know, because we couldn't have our fundraiser.
Right. Oh,
right.
wow.
I know. And it came just in time because our donor donated for 7 years, and then he said after the 7th year, and then this year it was like Michael Anthony from The Millionaire came. No,
That's real. No, that's
That's
really
good.
wonderful. But anyone who wants to donate, also goods or services, if there's a
On our website, there's that
Yes.
information. You can go
Wonderful.
on to donate. Also on Facebook, too. We have a page on Facebook, and you can donate through that.
yes,
Okay, thank you. You can donate through that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
you can
wonderful.
just, we have all that.
Well, we have a little bit of time left, and so I would just like to talk a little bit about Gail Meadows and your joy and the things that you still love about San Francisco as someone who's lived here for all this time, and some of the things that San Francisco could do better.
Well, I love about San Francisco the weather, the ocean. I love that there are politically like-minded people like myself. I love my friends of color who are steadfastly not leaving, right? I like poetry readings and plays. It still holds a lot of charm for me. I'm sad that there's not more people, black people here. I guess I said before, when I see another black person, it's like a holiday, an African-American holiday, right? And it is like that for them too, because we were taught or directed to say hello to African-American people. I mean, you can say hello to anyone, but as a children, hello. And that might be because my parents were activists and our phone was ringing constantly and people were asking them questions about racism. And my mother was an early feminist, so I got off the topic a little bit, but it's a holiday when I see a person of color. I can play tennis year round. That's good, right? I can't have my trampoline up. That's sad, but the weather's okay for that if I can. What else? The food is good, right? And the people are friendly. And I'm happy that I still get to teach school and can play outside. Every year we have to teach children how to play foursquare and jump rope, and I can still do that, so that's good.
Wow.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I like to swim. I'm just generally fortunate and happy that I get to do these things. We have a special camp that our students go
Right.
to.
I'm glad that we're going to
called
mention
Camp
that.
Winter Rainbow, and it's an extension of our school. That camp teaches tenacity as we do, or they drill them in tenacity. I guess I don't think you can teach tenacity, but you set up the situation, empathy as we do. And they have adult camp, which myself and some other people started for all of our friends who had never gone to camp as children.
Right.
So that's nice. And it's a performing arts camp. It's a professional performing arts camp. And it's for 3 months in the summer. Adults go 1 week. And I'm fortunate to be able to do that. But of course, COVID nixed that. But next year, I hope.
Yeah, I think that's worth mentioning to folks who, don't have a lot of access to outdoor experience. I mean, that includes myself, right? I rarely leave the city limits. So, it's very alluring to me to think about this outdoor camp in Laytonville where you can just breathe some air and then the kids learn like circus camp skills.
Oh, yeah, circus skills
it just
too,
like
right.
it just sounds
It's
wonderful.
And see, the adults, you can go to camp and just be in a hammock all day long and go to the creek if you want to. Right,
Okay,
right.
now we're talking.
Right, or you could teach writing there,
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful, like you said, extension of Meadows
it
Livingstone
absolutely
School.
is. And plus, we bring blackness to that camp.
Thank
Right,
you.
right.
And there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of years about black folks navigating the outdoors, right, and all of that. So, giving children that opportunity to claim their space in the outdoors that is
Absolutely.
for all of us, right?
Right. Well, I am a bird watcher, and I remember once in particular, this person said, "Look, a black birder." And we're all looking around. What kind of bird is that? She meant
boy.
me.
Oh,
And see,
boy.
that was my clue to step up to her nicely and say, what you said wasn't very nice.
Yeah.
You're making it sound like I'm an animal. We thought it was a bird. It's like people of color bird watch, and they go out into nature,
Right.
Right,
Oh
right.
boy, thank you,
Yeah.
Gail, for like imparting all this information to the kids and to all of us, and making San Francisco a better
Oh,
place.
thanks, Denise.
Yeah, no, day in, day out,
Yeah.
really, really, it's been a true service. I mean, for 40 years, think of the number of people who have passed through the doors of that school and benefited from your education and gone on to make
To make
change.
change. I think it's
Real
500 people or more.
real significant cultural leaders and in those other fields that you mentioned, science, medicine.
Yes, and everything.
It's wonderful. Congratulations,
Thank you.
Gail. I'm really happy to.
Thank you. And thank you for having me today.
Wonderful.
Right,
Always a pleasure. So thank you, Burden Beckett. Once again, we'll be here next month, actually with someone that you know.
Who?
Next month will be Lisa Tiny Gray Garcia.
Oh, right.
We'll talk about her recent publications and the work that she does helping and spreading the word about taking back the land and housing folks. And so that'll be a great discussion.
And you have Tongo, too, my poet laureate. Have you had him yet?
No,
you're
we
not?
haven't, but we should mention
should.
before we sign off that Gail Meadows did educate San Francisco's poet laureate Tongo Eisen Martin, who probably did his very first recitations in your
He
schoolhouse.
did. He wrote that in a book to me. He autographed a book, and he said, my first recitation, my first poem was written under the freeway in the
Wow. Well, thanks for mentioning
Thank
that. He's a very busy person, but
Yes, he
maybe
is.
we will be able to get him in that seat soon. So thank you again,
you.
Gail. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Jenna.
Thank
and
you, Bert
we'll
and
see you
Beckett.
next month.
Thank you very much.